YouTubers, today is my first video in HD. I just got an HD camera, getting used to it, and eventually I'm going to transition all my videos to HD. I'll be posting a video on my camera soon to show you what I got. So it takes a bit of getting used to working with the new HD camera. The files are much bigger, they're a different format than my old analog camera, but the picture is so much clearer. I also have to experiment and find the best format for YouTube so that my videos can be streamed in HD as well. So anyways, today is video number 31 of Small Engines Questions and Answers. Today I've got a few questions. I'm going to review some of the stuff that I've already mentioned in a previous Q&A regarding Tecumseh carburetors, because I've had so many questions in regards to those carburetors just in the last week. So to start with, I'll talk about the Tecumseh carburetors on your snowblower. Now, some people told me that they've cleaned the carburetor on their Tecumseh snowblower engine, and even after cleaning it, they've had problems with it. Sometimes just cleaning the carburetor doesn't do the job, and sometimes when you separate the bowl from the carburetor, you have to replace that O-ring. I'll just show you what I mean by that. So here's the typical carburetor on your 8 to 11 horsepower Tecumseh engine. Now, when you remove the bowl on this carburetor, you're going to notice an O-ring over here, right around the carb. Even if you've cleaned your carburetor, you put it back together, everything looks good, sometimes this O-ring needs to be replaced anyways. It only costs about $1 or $2, and it can save you a lot of problems by replacing that. Another important thing to notice is if your bowl is corroded where it meets the O-ring on the carburetor, it should be replaced because you can get an air leak there. Fuel can leak, but what's going to happen is if you have an air leak, your engine's not going to run right. Also, make sure that it's not leaking over here where the dump fuel valve is. Now, what I do is I usually replace the bowl. It only costs around $5 or less. The O-ring's pretty cheap. You can buy kit number 631021B. Now, with kit number 631021B, you're going to get the O-ring. You're going to get the bowl gasket over here. You're going to get the needle and seat and the little pin that holds the needle as well. So for about $10 to $15, you replace all these parts. You also get the new gasket here, and then you're sure there's no fuel or air leaks going on. Now, if your carb's the type with the adjusting screw at the bottom, remove the screw, and always make sure you replace the O-ring that goes there, because it could cause an air leak if it's cracked and brittle like this one is. Also, remove the air mixture screw right here and replace the O-ring on it as well. Also, check all your fuel lines, check the primer line, because sometimes it rots right where the connector is and it breaks off or it's got cracks. Replace that, or just snip it a bit and re-hook it onto the connector. And like I said, check the fuel line back there. Now, if your carb's leaking a lot of fuel, remove the float, shake it. If you hear fuel inside of it, that means it's taking on fuel and you need to replace the float. What's going to happen is if it's full of fuel, is your motor is going to keep flooding. Fuel is going to spill out the carburetor because the float isn't going up to shut the needle. Also, make sure all the holes are clean in the bowl nut here. And this is the type with the adjusting screw underneath, and there's holes in that one as well. And a tiny hole up here that needs to be cleaned. So basically, this is just a reminder. You can also go to my channel and type in Tecumseh carburetor repair, and many videos are going to come up on how to do this. Now, another question I get sometimes is people are asking me if they can take a motor from a generator and use it for a go-kart. Well, sometimes you can and sometimes you can't, and I'll show you exactly why. Down here on the floor, I've got a Honda motor from an old generator. The electrical generating part of this generator was no more good, so I've got a good engine that's running now, but the only problem is when you look at the shaft down here, it's tapered like on a snowmobile. So that becomes a problem. You would have to keep the armature that went on here, which went to the electrical unit, and get it machined so that you can either weld a clutch on it or put a sprocket. There's a hole down here with thread, so you could put a bolt and hold it, but you would have to somehow get something machined that would go on there, stay on there, and then put your clutch and your sprocket on there. So it's a bit of a problem, I find. So basically what you need for a go-kart is a motor with a shaft that's keyed like that. Then you can add a centrifugal clutch on there, and that's going to work for you. It's much easier attaching a clutch to a keyed shaft like that than to have a shaft that's tapered like on the previous motor I just showed you. So here's an old Victa motor. This one's not running too good. When you go to throttle up, it dies. and I cannot find any other carburetor around here in Canada for it. They're not that popular. But anyways, there's a clutch on a motor here, so you'd want to get a centrifugal clutch like that for your go-kart. And these clutches there only fit on a keyed shaft. So if the shaft on your motor was 5/8, you would get a clutch with a 5/8 bore. If it was 3/4 inch shaft you had on your motor, you would get a 3/4 inch bore, etc. Then it fits perfectly on the shaft. Now, some of you guys saw my granny card in my last Q&A video last week, and some of you guys asked me what do you call the bearings that hold the shaft onto the cart. Well, here's the granny card here. I've got a wheel off to show you exactly what I mean by those bearings onto the shaft. This is exactly what I'm talking about right here, and these are called pillow blocks. Now, these pillow blocks have two holes in them, one here and one on the other side. You can put a bolt right through and bolt them onto your frame, and then the bearing is inside the block here. It's even got a grease fitting down here that you can grease it with. And when you buy these pillow blocks, you buy the same bore size as your shaft. So if you've got a 3/4 inch shaft, you buy a pillow block with a 3/4 inch hole inside where the bearing is. And here's another view of the pillow block. If you go on the other side, you'll see by the other wheel here that I've got another pillow block on that side. And if you look inside the pillow block here, you buy these little retainers. There's a set screw inside, like an Allen key set screw. You put one on both sides of your shaft, and what they do, these little retainers, is they keep your shaft from sliding in and out of the pillow block. Got one here, and I've also got one inside here on the other side where the other wheel is. A good place to buy these in Canada is at Princess Auto or princessauto.com. In the States, you can buy them probably at an automotive store or where they sell go-kart parts. You can also look on eBay and buy them, but they might cost a bit to ship because they're a little bit heavy. But at Princess Auto, you can buy all kinds of sizes. You can even buy the shaft, and you can even buy the centrifugal clutch that I showed you earlier on the other engine. Now, another question I got recently is somebody has a go-kart and he says he keeps snapping the shaft on it. Well, that could be because he has a bit too much torque. It could be that the size of the shaft isn't big enough. You may want to go to at least a 3/4 inch shaft or possibly a 1 inch if you can. Also, you don't want the chain to be too tight on the sprocket that goes to the engine because you could end up snapping the shaft on your engine. So you want a little bit of play in the chain as well on your go-kart. Now, the shaft on my granny cart here is 3/4 inch in diameter. So that's the size of the shaft if you measure it from side to side like that. I wouldn't go any smaller than 3/4 inch. If I make another go-kart, preferably I'd like to have a 1 inch shaft. You can also buy these shafts at princessauto.com or right in their store, and their shafts come keyed, so you can put a key there to put your wheels on and so forth, and they're good. If you use an actual shaft that was designed for that, it's going to be a bit harder than if you use just a regular metal rod or shaft. So that'll be it for today. Thanks again for watching. Thanks for all your support, and have yourselves a great weekend.